TheSmileBc here with something very different from what I normally do. Something I kind of wanted to share with you guys. Something interesting. Perhaps you guys are curious how a part of development on the mod goes. And I've been working on the Speechbanks for Beta 34, and with permission of Mevans, of course. I kind of want to show you how I approach about getting to the point of writing Speechbanks. Which might be interesting if you're interested in world building and things like Dungeons and Dragons. This might be something that kind of falls in line with that, in my opinion. It's a good exercise either way for if you're building your own world or if you're just trying to understand a certain culture. So well, we're just going to be messing around with it a bit. I'm going to show you how I approach to writing the lines, and then that's basically it. So, as you guys can see, I am in the Southern Coasts region. Now, as you can see, on the left side of the screen, I have a document called Speechbanks, Beta 34, the Hanador, Nomads, and Golf. I'm still working on Golf, but these two are, as far as I'm aware, currently ready, the first iteration at least. So, Coastlings are basically the Haradrim we already knew. So I'm pretty sure if I walked up to one right here, maybe not the Random Citizen. Yeah, the Random Citizen also has the old speech banks in them. So they already have technically speech banks. A lot of these that you start working on don't have any lines at all. But as you can see, we were familiar with this armor set and these lines. But let's just kind of jump into it if I'm stealing Philip DeFranco's intro. So I have this screen up most of the time. This is basically the most important screen that we're going to be facing with, and every now and then I would kind of look at other details, but you can get so much information already from the culture and what these people are like by asking yourself a very simple question and looking at what these short descriptions already give you. So the first question I always ask myself is, how do these people get food? How do these people get food? Where are they getting it from? Do they do it themselves? Do they let others work for them? That line of questioning is oddly very effective. So the coastlings, if we quickly look at all the lore text, Numenorian Fortress, this is a southern town, Sandy Hills, Great Battle, so military for these two, the Gate of Fuino, built long ago by the mighty Black Numenorian Lord Fuina. These fortified gates protect the realm of Umbar, so you could almost say this belongs to the Umbar faction, so we're not going to look at that. Gate of Umbar as well. Now, Ain an Ahar, the Eye of Harad, a fabled city among the south, counted as a wonder even among the Haradrim themselves. Now, this doesn't give us much about how they live, but what this can give us later is when we write in the speech banks that they would refer to the beautiful city or the fabled city of Ain an Ahar, and they can approach the player of, have you ever been to the Eye of Harad, TheSmileBc, or Child Walrus, whatever, and then that is how you can make this the NPC seem a lot more interactive. Now the Gardens of Beruthiel, the beautiful hanging gardens of Harad, said to have been built long ago by a jealous southern warlord, one among many lovers of the infamous Queen Beruthiel. Again, a bit that doesn't tell us much on how they get food, but it does tell us that there is a lot of history around this queen, and we can work with that later. Ashtiaz Anahar is one of the great southern cities whose famed markets, now this is interesting, bustle with traders and goods from all across the far lands of Harad and Rune. Rune would be the sailors, which are quite tricky to get there, so they would not be as common. But markets are known, and the Izem Ultus has near the edge of the hostile Harad desert stands a surprisingly lively bazaar where nomad merchants and far Haradrim poachers trade their exotic goods. Now you can see here, there's no word of the coastlinks. And that is something to keep in mind, because the lack of coastlinks mean they don't tend to travel all the way down here to join in that trade. No, in fact, I've already gone over this waypoint when I did the nomads, because they are mentioned in the description, and the nomads would probably, across the river, travel north to travel with the coastlinks, and then eventually up to Hanador, because this is a more gracious path to follow the river. Now let's see, we're gonna have to go through all of them because it's important. Tavinen, a town on the coast south runs upon the river Astrasir, which sees many merchant ships, again important, passing between the cedar woods and the great southern cities. So, and the cedar woods straight on back. The wood of the cedar tree is valued highly by the Southrons. As Sauron rises in Mordor, he demands incredible amounts as tribute. This means that definitely the coastlinks are invested in the lumber. Lumber seems very important to them. We don't hear much about stone, which just means it probably isn't any different than usual. We don't have, well, we have a Númenórean fortress here. But what surprises me is that there isn't much mention of how they would get their food, which means it's mostly up to our discretion. We just know that they have at least 2 big trade cities. Now I imagine Ain and Ahar is also quite wealthy due to the larger lake next to it that would allow for more wealth to flow in. Now, if this wasn't clear enough, we of course have Umbar right here. Now Umbar has a lot more history behind it, so it's not as easy for me to write lines for. But we know Umbar is essentially, if anything, the richest or most developed because they have that Númenórean past. So there's probably a lot of trade on the road. Bit surprised that there is no road here, which is interesting because that means that all trade here goes through ships. Most trade goes through ships here as well. So you could pretty much surely say that the southern coasts, the coastlinks, are quite familiar with ship trade and less so with moving caravans, save for those of the nomads. Now I have this document here, and the first answer we have to, question we have to answer is, how do they get food? Which is pretty simple to answer, because they live in quite a greenish land. Sure, there's sand, but they have rivers flowing through, they have forests, so farms are probably pretty common. So that would be, southern coastlings would definitely farm with slaves. So how I would go about starting this up is really just write it to myself, as if I want to read back to it, and kind of just read it and be like, alright, this is how they work. So summary of the culture. The coastlings are probably not the one, and it's a bit flawed in how I type it out, but that's fine. Not used to the most hardships out of all the Haradrim tribes, because they're not immediately on the front line. Sure, the north has a lot of war information, but you don't hear anything near this end of that conflict. It's really just the mouth of God, what is the name? The Hanan and north. So kind of this coastline up until Umbar, because Umbar kind of protects this region already, because it's right in the outside of the mouth of Umbar, if that's a thing. I'm not sure. So they're probably no war. And they're very, very much war-oriented, because they even have warlords in their descriptions. But war and conflict is usually what I write later, Please go away. I'm gonna fly up a bit so we have the space. And like, if we can straight away see an orchard here, so we know there's plenty of time and place to farm. Our green from river and from, what was the river name again? Astrasir. From the river Astrasir. Now I'm going to be looking that up later to make Speechbanks to relate to the Astrasir. And generally you think of like, alright, what would people here say? But what would people here that are from here say? So that, you know, you have a focused, oh, I'm from this region, but I can be anywhere in the coasts region, or in the cedar woods. It's really just a way of approaching this, and it's not the way, it's just I'm trying to show you guys how I do it. And as you can see, well, I kind of wanted to open it up, but I'll keep some of this. There's going to be lore books that cover basically the summary culture that I write, so that, but then rephrased and made nice so you guys can understand. It's a bit of a chaotic video as well, but that's okay. Did we read this one? One of the lesser cities, which nonetheless commands many fierce swords and a fearsome devotion to the great Eye of the North. Right. We also know that the Haradrim are very religious in favor of Sauron. As well as, well, very religious, or at least very faithful in him as a lord. We know that from the tributes of the Cedar. We know that from here. And was there another place? I don't think so. Not right now, at least. None that directly refer to him. But with the Cedarwood waypoint and the waypoint, we know that they do stuff in the name of Sauron, or at least in favor of him. So, again, for later Speechbanks, what could happen is that the coastlings start thinking Ein an Ahar is it is a fabled city, counted as a wonder. Some might thank Sauron for that achievement. Doesn't matter if the city is older. Be aware that not, unlike our world, not every piece of history is noted down, and legends and myth and stories are very important in Tolkien's world itself. So the Sauron coasts could easily be deluded in thinking Sauron is responsible for everything good in their realm and Gondor for everything evil. That might just be something that happens, but that's not certain. So you can approach that standpoint from both ways, where people say, oh yeah, he did a lot of great stuff for us, but I don't think I believe there's more to it, or I'm confident Sauron is to be thanked for this. Really, how far you want to push that religion is up to us. That's the writer's discretion. I think I'm gonna make him average religious, probably a bit more in connection with, because they do seem to be influenced directly. Whereas Hanador, through this of Ugri Sardine, you can clearly see that there would be a religious of somewhat fear in this, because send a rain of ash upon their lands. Ash will kill the lands essentially and poison the air. So the desert of Lost Laden is probably a legend for Hanador. So in that way, there's more of a fear here, and rather a devotion here. And that contrast you can build with, and making them a bit more unique per subfaction. Now, I was writing, and it's a lot easier if I'm just talking or thinking to myself, but let's see, the coastlings are probably not used to the most hardships out of all the Haradrim tribes. They have fairly green lands. Their lands are green from the river Astrasir, and the coastal regions itself, as proven by larger forests growing at various locations. Sometimes it's just hard to find the right word, but that is honestly fine. Their close relation to Umbar will probably allow for them to be a little bit more developed in comparison to the Hanador, who constantly deal with the Gondorian front, which is, it kind of leaks into, of course, each other, because all these sub-factions have connections, but Hanador, of course, is bordering Harondor, and this has been such a war zone for so long that these guys have had a hard life and probably absolutely despise Gondor. These guys will also definitely hate Gondor, especially the Númenóreans, thanks to the Umbar influence that they have. Who constantly deal with the Gondorian front. Or the nomads, who never really settled down to specialize in any craft. Because this is simple history. You need a settlement with a population that eventually becomes large enough, or you manage to get enough food for the people, and then other people can start doing other stuff like pottery. And I think the southern coasts, especially with the fabled city here and having a few trade cities, get to that point of being a little bit more developed. The nomads, that's kind of their choice. They apparently can live off traveling a lot and trading with. Honestly, the nomads are dependent on these trade locations and how wealthy they are to make a profit out of that. But that's fine, because oh, that's actually quite interesting. Coastlings don't travel for trade. Trade comes to them. They have rivers. It kind of happens automatically. Sure, they might trade amongst themselves. So, Tavinen will definitely trade with Ashtiaz and Ahar, but they are not gonna go from here to the Izem Ultsus, because they aren't mentioned, and why would they? The nomads travel north. This gives them a bit more of superior attitude, because of course the other people work for them to get their wealth. This may sound initially weird, as well as a lack of trust in strangers, but if you think about it, if you're a traveler, you're much more familiar with how respectful you have to be. If you're a traveler, you go to a different region, you're being very respectful, at least you should be, because you're the outsider there. People have to deal with you. And if your people travel a lot, they kind of learn that idea of respect. So the nomads, or the nomadic tribes, are probably very, very kind and polite when interacting with strangers, because they know, first of all, how it feels to be that. And second of all, their livelihood depends on trade, so they have to be a bit kind. The coastlings are more of a... We have our shit together and we are building wealth through trade, or we're exporting. They export to Hanador, food primarily, and weapons for war. To the Gulf, they export slaves. These are the exporters, so they are kind of... and sure, they import from Umbar, but that's kind of a natural trade system. Now, so they're a bit of superior attitude towards strangers because they are the ones giving the wealth. Um, that also makes them a bit more of a secluded or isolated. Well, that may not be the right word, but it's their region, it's their culture. So, coastlings don't travel for trade. Trade comes to them. This gives them a bit more of a superior attitude, as well as a lack of lust in strangers. The tales of conflict from Umbar and the northern coastal regions only reinforce an initial doubt in northerner travelers or merchants. Because why would they trust a Gondorian that tries to trade with them? Alright. Reinforce initial doubt in northern travelers or merchants. In addition to that, their devotion to Sauron in tributes and what was this? Commands many fierce swords and the face of devotion to the degree. In tribute and military force alienate to any non-Sauron devotee. They're probably gonna feel a bit distant when you don't praise Sauron to a certain degree. Again, this is not God, I can't find a word. This isn't definitive truth. This is just my interpretation. Usually, I relay this back to the team, and they'll bring in any changes if I misunderstood something or if we're missing a certain point. But it is my way of looking, and then from here I'll be able to work into the speech banks. Sure, I think I'm gonna leave it at this. Now, again, this may look really simple, but just from looking a bit at, this is all lore basically we managed to figure out from looking at the region, looking at the regions they are adjacent to, and what the lore texts say. Which is, by the way, one of the best functions ever added to the Lord of the Rings. Right, so I think I'm gonna leave this as the lore right now, and I'm gonna write a few lines that you can see how I do it, which is really not an interesting system. But I just wanted to share with you guys how I approach this, and I hope you guys find it interesting. So, normally what I do is make one table first. Now there is a system where sorry. There is a certain system that you can approach, where every table will be its own category. So this is coast friendly, and then there will be another table with coast hostile, or coast bazaar trader friendly, and then that way they're categorized and easily put in. But I always the first table I make is just all speech banks, and then I'll categorize them later and then mash them into one, because it's easier for me to just start milling out speech banks and then categorizing them than to specifically think, alright, I need what would warriors say. I would rather look at what would these people say, what would warriors keep to themselves, or what would the regular peasants not dare to say, or what would be something only a trader would know. And I usually begin with the friendly and the coast. Now again, these already kind of have lines, so most of these lines are going to be either redundant or unnecessary, but that doesn't matter. They can be picked out. I write plenty, and then any that don't make the cut, they simply don't make the cut. That's fine. So I usually start with a greeting. Again, we have to look at the lore we figured out. So they're kind of distant. But if a distant person or a reluctant individual would welcome you. Now this might be a bit really straightforward. You now walk on the green coast of Harad, TheSmileBc. Player name is indicated through that symbol, in case you didn't know. But it's more of a comment or a statement that you're here. Which can be a greeting of itself. Which is, again, very bold, but why would these people have any other inclination? This is something they would say at the start. Now, I know there's a bit of the awkwardness when somebody has 10,000 alignments, and they've been working for the Southern Coast and built every single waypoint, and they still say you don't look like you are from around here. That's fine. Honestly, there is an extent these Speechbanks will bring us, and it's about the idea that the culture still seems alive. And let's pick a location to talk about. So the Gardens of Beruthiel. Have you seen the Gardens of... There! Have you seen the Gardens of Beruthiel, TheSmileBc? They say the flowers there flourish forever. This is just a random quote. Of course there is no build at the Gardens of Beruthiel, but if you're a player and you come across this line, what I hope this incentivizes is you opening up your map and being like, hold up, where is this place? Oh. Huh. And we'll visit there. And hopefully if you're on a server, you have an amazing community that already built the place, so that there's actually to look at. Sure. One of my forefathers was once the favorite lover of Queen Beruthiel. Why not? This doesn't have to be true. The person could just be saying that. If you talk to each individual long enough, they'll all say that they were that. But this would be something men would boast about. Of course they would. And would lie about at the tavern. Because it's an infamous person. Sure, let's make one that is a bit rude. But also quite... It will lure out a reaction of the player, perhaps. Are you an escaped slave? Or just a lost traveler? Because you look like the people they enslave. At least I do. Okay, and essentially I just keep doing this. I write out a whole Steam pile of 50 Speechbanks and then start divvying them up. I'm gonna leave it at here now because I'm just really tired. But I do hope you guys found this interesting. It's a little bit of a behind the scenes on how I approach writing the Speechbanks. I must say this is the first update that I've really focused on Speechbanks. I want to be a narrative designer, so it was really interesting for me to dive into this. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like rating if you did. It does actually help me figure out what you guys want to see more of. There's going to be more videos of kind of experimental types of content. So the interactivity with you guys is going to mean a lot. So I hope you stick around for that. And then until next time, this was TheSmileBc, and I'm out. Peace.